Joining me now, Mike Davis, founder and president of the Article 3 Project, Dave Ehrenberg, state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, and host of True Crime MTN on YouTube, and Phil Holloway, legal analyst and host of Inside the Law. The legal all-stars continue. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let me get your reactions first to this verdict last night. Mike Davis, I'll start with you.
It's an outrageous verdict, but predicted, and it was part of a partisan, corrupt, and rigged process. There was a guilty verdict. This judge will convict and sentence. That will get overturned on appeal. The issue is that will not get resolved before the election, and that's what this is all about. This is election interference by Joe Biden and his allies and his aides.
Dave?
I know it won't surprise you, Megyn, that I'll disagree with my friend Mike. This was a predictable verdict, but I do think that it's clear that presidents do not communicate directly with state attorneys. If any White House had communicated with a state attorney, it would be me, because I oversee Mar-a-Lago. I can tell you, I don't even get invited to a White House holiday party. So, you can try to blame. I'm obviously not on anyone's list.
And
especially now that I go on your show.
I'm totally bringing you to the Megyn Kelly Show Christmas party this year, but keep going.
It'll be the only one I get invited to, Megyn. Thank you. And as far as the outcome, it was, as we discussed previously, it was pretty predictable, because I do think that Todd Blanche, Trump's lawyer, made a couple crucial errors. I think Trump's best defense would have been, yes, these were reimbursements to Michael Cohen, and so what? You can count them as legal fees when you reimburse a lawyer/fixer. So there's no intent here to commit a crime. But Todd Blanche undid that in his opening statements.
I have to say, I like that. Phil, your reaction?
Well, great to be with you again, as always. They say garbage in, garbage out. The verdict, being the garbage that came out of this trial, was directly related to a number of things. For example, the judge, who has his own legal reasons why he should have recused himself, notwithstanding any bias he personally might have, he should have recused himself due to the financial conflicts of interest with his daughter. But he also has his own personal bias. He should have recused himself for those reasons. He donated money, to the anti-Trump, pro-Biden thing before the trial. And then you had all of these ridiculous rulings that culminated with this ridiculous jury instruction that allowed the jury to be non-unanimous, Megyn, on one of the essential elements of the offense, the so-called other crime. What was it? And we still, now that the verdict's in, Megyn, we still do not know, because the verdict form did not lay it out in that way. So we don't yet know what exactly this jury agreed on and what it may have disagreed on. And those three possibilities for other charges were things that were never even charged in the indictment. So you have a garbage in, you have a garbage out, and that's what this verdict is. It's garbage.
Speaking of that donation that the judge made, you raised this the other day, Mike. So the judge, he donated $35 in violation of this rule prohibiting New York judges from making political donations, and he made it to a group, he earmarked it for, quote, resisting the Republican Party and Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy. Mike and Dave, we talked about this the other day. The Democrats right now, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dick Durbin, is trying to get Samuel Alito forced to recuse himself from deciding these two cases, J6 and immunity, that are up before SCOTUS right now, because his wife flew a flag that was on George Washington's ships, saying, no, that's too much. That poses an appearance of impropriety. But this is fine for this judge, to have donated money to resist the Republican Party and Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy group, Mike.
Well, that's a problem. That was clearly an illegal campaign contribution by a judge under New York law that got him reprimanded by the New York court system. We just found out he got reprimanded many months ago about this, but guess what? That didn't deter this corrupt Democrat Juan Merchan, whose adult daughter, Lauren Merchan, is raising millions of dollars off of this unprecedented criminal trial over which her father presided, requiring his recusal under New York statute. He didn't recuse. Instead, he retaliated against President Trump with an illegal and constitutional gag order.
How about that one, Dave? You didn't like the flag being flown outside of Alito's. We talked about appearance of impropriety. Does it create an appearance of impropriety for the sitting judge over the first trial of a former president to have donated to the resisting the Republican Party and Donald Trump's radical right-wing legacy group?
Well, it was $15, but yeah, I concede that.
Well, it's $35 with some money. Yeah, earmark, but whatever. So what? He did it. Shows his bias.
Well, the thing is, he did go to the State Ethics Commission to see if he needed to step down from the case, and the commission said no. I only wish Sam Alito would do the same thing, but that's right, the Supreme Court gets to make its own rules.
Sam Alito could go to Chief Justice John Roberts tomorrow and say, "What do you think?" And he would say, "You're good."
No.
He would say you're good. You're right about that.
He actually did. He checked the Supreme Court ethical guidelines, and he cited that in his letter to the Senate, where he checked with the Supreme Court ethical guidelines. He's actually required not to recuse under the Supreme Court's ethical guidelines because there is a presumption that Supreme Court justices do not recuse because of the appearance of bias, because you don't want parties playing games to get justices to recuse because there are only 9 justices and you can't substitute them like you can substitute the lower court justices or judges.
It's just amazing that we can have an appeal to heaven flag cause the left to want these justices off the Supreme Court cases, but an actual donation to a far left group that says its whole mission is to resist Donald Trump and his radical right-wing legacy. No problem. Okay, go right ahead and preside over the very first trial ever, criminal trial for a former president. All right, speaking of presidents, our current president decided to weigh in on this from the White House, ill-advised, in my view. Just stop. You represent us all when you're in that house and when you are the president. Stop it. Remember when we used to have presidents who didn't comment on criminal cases? Just zip, got a whole lot of for you. But here's what he had to say.
Before I begin my remarks, I just want to say a few words about what happened yesterday in New York City. The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen. It was a process that Donald Trump's attorney was part of. The jury heard 5 weeks of evidence, 5 weeks. And after careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years, and it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he did, Phil. That's exactly what he did. This president in the federal cases hit through his AG and these 2 state prosecutors in your locale with Fannie Willis and up in mine with Alvin Bragg. Your reaction to the president?
Yeah, guess what, Mr. President? We didn't have to wait for the verdict to know it was rigged. We watched it in real time being rigged day after day after day. We watched as acting Justice Merchan repeatedly would sustain the objections of the prosecutors before the objections even got out of their mouth and without offering the other side an opportunity to weigh in. And we watched every day as Justice Merchan gave ridiculous jury instructions that did not require their unanimity on an essential element of the offense. And we watched in real time as this judge let this prosecutor take this trial all the way to the end without even naming what the so-called other crime was that they were trying to hang around the neck of the defendant. This is all in violation of due process. It's all in violation of Donald Trump's constitutional rights. And this is not even to mention allowing in all of the irrelevant testimony from witnesses like Stormy Daniels and to build a case on a convicted felonious liar such as Michael Cohen, it's reprehensible. It's reprehensible of Bragg. It's reprehensible for this judge. It's reprehensible for Joe Biden to stand there and tell me that I've got to take this and I've got to respect it. I don't have to respect any jury verdict when it is built upon a card of lies.
Yes, I agree with you. Dave, what do you make of the remember, do you know what I'm saying? Remember when we used to not have presidents do this? You know, the president of the United States did not feel the need to weigh in on criminal cases. And I would say, especially when it's your opponent in the presidential election, stay out of it. That you're working for us, for the entire country. Don't speak about this from the White House. Am I wrong? Am I missing something here?
Well, I think you may be fighting the last war, Megyn. I think we're way past that point. I mean, Donald Trump called for his opponent to be locked up. And as president, he tried to pressure the attorney general to do something about his opponents. So this is not new anymore. You know, this has been going on for a while. So I don't take umbrage that Biden talked about it. You know, I don't think he's going to spend a lot of the campaign talking about it. If he continues to do so from the White House, then I'd have more of a problem. But I don't have a problem with him just making a reaction statement the next day. We'll see how much further he goes.
Okay, but just for the record, Trump has definitely said some outrageous things. However, I was there and I covered Barack Obama, who was the first that I know. I mean, I definitely, my tenure as a journalist began when W. Bush was president. He never did this. It was Barack Obama on the Trayvon Martin case who, for the first time, felt the need to weigh in on a private matter. And now we're at the point where we have Joe Biden, as he's running for president, about to be elected, calling Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist, for which there was no evidence, and none of that panned out, no apology from him to Kyle. And now it on and on it goes. It's not appropriate. I want them to stop doing this. Now the campaign, they're not even trying to seem highbrow about convicted felon Donald Trump. But here's how they sounded. Mitch Landrieu, he is the Biden campaign co-chair this morning on Morning Joe. Take a listen, Sot 6.
It's a very sober moment for the country and a very sad moment for the country, for all of the people in America to have a president or an ex-president become a convicted felon. That's nothing for anybody to have a lot of joy about. And as a consequence of that trial, Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. You can have a guy that's a convicted felon that has been found liable of defamation, sexual abuse, and business fraud, and now a convicted felon who thinks about himself, and of course, every word that comes out of his mouth thinks about revenge against people who dare cross him. Or you can have Joe Biden, who wakes up every day thinking about the American people.
Mike, it's a very sad and sober moment for convicted felon Donald Trump, who's a convicted felon. In case you weren't aware, he was convicted of a felony.
Well, I hope these Biden Democrats, including President Biden, keep doing this and they keep celebrating their Pyrrhic victory here, because I don't think they understand how much they have outraged the American people. They have poked the bear. I am getting inundated with phone calls, text messages, DMs, emails, donations to Article 3 Project when we're not even soliciting donations on this matter. It is overwhelming what I'm hearing from people. And these aren't my fellow Trump supporters. These are people who are tired of Trump. They're sick of Trump. They even don't like Trump, right? But they are all in now because they see what happens with this trial in New York, that it is a corrupt, partisan, rigged process. And they don't find this is acceptable in America.
Dave, that's the thing. To me, this feels almost like a Brett Kavanaugh moment where that moment made a lot of people Republicans. And it brought back into the fold a lot of Republicans who didn't like Trump. But what they did to Kavanaugh was it activated many people. And this moment seems like it's doing the same thing. Like, I am like Mike. I am getting the same amount of incoming to me. People are stopping me on the street, wanting me to know how they feel and saying nothing can stop them from voting for Donald Trump now. And then they all start with like, I don't really even love the guy. Do you think that that's something that the Democrats have factored in, right? Do you think they thought this would contain any backlash?
I don't know how much they thought about that. I can tell you this, Megyn, I run in different circles and I'm experiencing the same on my side, where there's a new energy that didn't exist before. Democrats were sleepwalking through this campaign. They were not enthused about Joe Biden. They were bedwetting, as we like to do, thinking we're going to lose. And then all of a sudden there's a spring in their step. They're fired up. And I wonder if this is the type of thing to light a fire under the base, to bring the base home to Joe Biden. We'll see. But in the end, this is going to be decided, this election, by that small number of swing voters in those few swing states. And how they will react to this is still up in the air.
Phil, this is what Trump posted last night on his Truth Social. It was before he'd really spoken in earnest to it, but this was sort of his messaging, and I think his mood right after this happened. SOT 5.
This is the final battle. With you at my side, we will demolish the deep state. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communists, Marxists, and fascists. We will throw off the sick political class that hates our country. We will rout the fake news media, and we will liberate America from these villains once and for all.
It reads, join President Trump's fight for America. And he reported himself this morning, Phil, that just in the overnight, he'd received over $40 million, or almost $40 million. I'm sure it's over 40 now, in donations. He said almost all of them small money donations. So the amount of people who would have had to have donated, the website crashed. There is real enthusiasm right now. And it's not just from core MAGA.
No, I think it's because Americans, whether they like him, even if they don't like him, Megyn, they have lived vicariously now through him because they have seen that this trial was unfair from the very beginning. They've seen how it was weaponized and the criminal justice system basically pointed like a double-barrel shotgun aimed directly at one specific citizen. So they've experienced that. When I have handled in my own career cases involving people who were innocent, outright innocent, yet they were charged with very, very serious things, you know, they oftentimes would say to me, I had no idea that the system could be used like this. And now a lot of America is feeling that same feeling because they're living this through Donald Trump. They see what's going on. They recognize that it's partisan. They recognize that it's not fair. And so they've turned a lot of people who might not otherwise be on the MAGA train, so to speak. They've brought them over to where they can be, you know what, I'm going to have to support this guy because what has happened to him is wrong. So absolutely, it's motivating people who did not necessarily like Trump or maybe not even considered voting for him before now, but now they will.
Mike, I feel strongly, and I just had a fierce debate with Alan Dershowitz and Mark Garagos about this, that it's time to fight. Let's fight the way they fight. Let's take off the gloves. Let's go UFC, hardcore. Let's start indicting their people. I'm sorry, but if this is how we're going to do it, then we're going to have to do it like this until we can restore sanity to the legal process. And I'll give you a suggestion just out of nowhere about who we could start with. Could we please run SOT 7?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anything going on today?
Yeah. That's Hillary Clinton last night in New York. What do you think?
I 100% agree with you, Megyn, and that's the exact approach I ran with the Kavanaugh confirmation when I was the chief counsel for nominations. I ran what I called the dead chicken strategy. And when I did my clerkship on the Supreme Court briefly to help Gorsuch get set up, all the clerks meet with all the justices for lunch. You have like speed dating with the 8 other justices. And our lunch with Justice Clarence Thomas was my best and most memorable because he talks about growing up on the farm in Georgia. When dogs killed chickens, you wrapped those dead chickens around those dogs' necks. And as those chickens rotted around those dogs' necks, those dogs lost the taste for chicken. And Republicans need to do the same thing with these Biden Democrats on this lawfare. And they need to give these Biden Democrats a healthy dose of their own medicine with their own indictments and their own investigations. I think after maybe 4 years of the Trump 47 Justice Department doing that, working with Republican prosecutors and Republican juries in deep red Republican areas, Republican judges, corrupt Republican judges, hopefully that donated to President Trump, like the Democrats are doing to like the Democrats are doing to Trump now. Once Democrats get a healthy dose of their own medicine with the dead chicken strategy, I bet you they'll think long and hard before they do this again.
I feel like you should put Clarence Thomas in touch with Kristi Noem. For the sake of her future chicken-eating dogs, I think we could save a lot of... By the way, it's literally every other day that I say to Stradwick, you behave or you're going to the Kristi Noem ranch. That's your next move. Off you go. Okay. But I wouldn't. I'm only joking. I joke because I love. Phil, where do you stand on it? Because I understand Dershowitz was saying, I'm a man of principle and I'll die a man of principle and I'm never going to play the left's games. That's McCarthyism. We don't beat it by becoming them. I just feel like that's a yesteryear mentality. It's on, but I mean, we've crossed a barrier that's you can't undo it. We're in a new, the Rubicon has been changed. And so we have to change the way we fight or we're going to keep losing. And by we, I mean sane people who miss the real America.
Well, listen, let's put it this way, Megyn. I understand the point you're making. You and I probably are going to see this one a little bit differently, and that's okay. We can still be friends, but I don't believe in the weaponization of the justice system for political purposes, not in any circumstances. It was wrong when it happens to Donald Trump. This would have been wrong if it were directed at Joe Biden or if it were Barack Obama or even Bill Clinton. And it would be wrong for people to go and find things that they can charge their political opponents with just as a way to get even. I can't support that.
How else do we get them to stop, Phil? How else do we don't want that either. Mike doesn't want that, and I don't want that. But the only way to make it stop is to do it temporarily, to make them feel the pain so that we can get back to normal.
And what you do is you find the people that are the perpetrators of this, the Juan Mershons, the Alvin Braggs, and you find the ways that they have violated not only their professional ethics, maybe they violated some criminal laws, and you use those things that they have done and you punish them for it through the mechanisms that exist. You've got bar associations.
I think it's an all in. That's an all in. I said this on X last night. I think Alvin Bragg should be disbarred. He should be disbarred. Any man who would do this to our justice system for political purposes to a former president and the likely nominee for the Republican Party has no business being in charge of people's futures and liberty. Mike, what do you make of it?
I think he should be more than just barred. I think he should be behind bars. And there is a federal criminal civil rights statute. It's called 18 USC 241 and 18 USC 242. These deal with conspiracy by government officials to violate someone's constitutional rights. And we've seen that over and over again with Soros-funded Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, former Obama and Biden senior political appointee Matthew Colangelo, and this Democrat corrupt judge Juan Mershon. Remember, this judge just happens to be randomly picked for all of these Trump-related cases. He got picked for the Trump Organization criminal trial. He got picked for Trump's trial. Now he got picked for Steve Bannon's trial. He's an acting justice on the Supreme Court. He's like the Forrest Gump of this lawfare against Trump in New York. He just happens to show up at the key times. It's not random. That's like a 1 in 15,000 chance that Juan Mershon ends up on all three of these Trump-related cases. He's obviously being selected. His daughter is raising millions of dollars off of this. She's getting very rich off of this. He is corrupt. He's violating Trump's civil rights with his illegal gag orders, with this jury instruction that he knows violates Ramos versus Louisiana, a Supreme Court decision from 2020, this rigged process, this partisan process. He should be behind bars. Alvin Bragg should be behind bars. Everyone who was involved with violating Trump's civil rights under 18 USC 241 and 242 should be behind bars.
They better watch it. Phil's clapping. They better watch it because Trump really could win this election. I mean, look, this is kind of a BS poll, to be honest. I have no idea. I've never heard of the Daily Mail poll. It's not the Daily Mail's, but it's JL Partners. And they polled 403, small sample size, likely voters. We do check these polls to make sure if they're legit. This has barely been rated by 538. It's got 1.6 stars out of 3 and only 2 polls analyzed. Okay, so for what it's worth. But that sort of snap poll showed that there was a slight bump for Trump in the voting public in his favor after this conviction. Now that's, again, take it for what it's worth. But we are going to have to watch these polls in the days and weeks to come to see whether this is a Kavanaugh moment where the Republican Party is galvanized and even leaners, the so-called independents who are leaners toward Republican or toward Trump, whether they come on board or whether it's the opposite effect. It's the Democrats who are enthused, as Dave just said, and leaners start leaning all the way away and back to Biden because they don't they don't like the words convicted felon and they actually take this seriously. We just don't know what the truth is. I will say this, and I'll give it to you, Dave. Judge Merchan is taking it on the chin by the right, but the left, including this man, could not be more laudatory. Let's play SOT 17.
Judge Juan Merchan, who is an absolute gentleman, to see him on that stand is to see poetry. It's to see a masterful judge who was quick with decision making. He was absolutely judicial perfection. And the jury had tremendous respect for him, as did I, which is what kept me off of all my social media. That and Danya, of course. The jury respects Judge Merchan, and I believe a lot of the antics that went on in the courtroom, whether it was by Blanche or by Donald himself with the eye closing, the leaning back, the total disregard for the jury, I don't think he engendered any positive feelings by anyone.
That, of course, was, to steal a term, convicted felon Michael Cohen on MSNBC last night. What are your thoughts, Dave, on this judge?
Well, just to go back what we were talking about earlier about his donations, it's this New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct. They said in an advisory opinion last May that these modest political contributions made more than 2 years ago cannot reasonably create an impression of bias or favoritism in the case before the judge. So he did check with the commission. They gave him a clean bill of health to go forward with it. Now, as far as what happened at the trial, he made rulings on both sides, and Donald Trump decided he was not going to testify. He had every ability to. Costello was the one key witness, and that was a mistake to put him on, and he got in a fight with the judge that was not a good look. So there were a lot of missed opportunities for the defense. It wasn't just like you have one judge and they railroaded Donald Trump. They had a lot of evidence. The jury took 9 hours. They asked a lot of questions, and in the end, they made the decision based on the facts and the evidence. One of the jurors got their information entirely from Truth Social and X, so it wasn't like all bunch of Antifa members on the jury. Well, that was what's been reported.
We looked that up. We looked that up because I thought, oh my God, is there a secret Trumper on the jury? That would be big. But no, actually what he said was that he gets his news from everywhere, including Twitter. And on Twitter, he sees everything, including some of Trump's Truth Social posts. So that is, as you know, not the same as being on Truth Social and actually getting your news from Truth Social. I want to spend one more minute on Michael Cohen, who's probably the most gleeful man in America today. Here's what he tried to tell Rachel Maddow in SOT 21 about himself.
The strategic necessity of you staying cool and having that same affect and everything. How hard was it?
Not hard at all. It's the media that wants to portray me as this sort of bombastic character. It's really not my nature.
We've all heard bombast from you.
But you've heard it from my Mea Culpa podcast or Political Beatdown podcast. It's a persona for it. Now, I can't go with intelligence, so I have to go with bombastic, right?
It's a persona. I mean, literally every reporter in news, left, center, and right, has a terrible story about Michael Cohen, berating them, swearing at them, threatening them. And since he raises the Mea Culpa podcast, which now he says is all acting, it's just a persona. Here's a bit from it in SOT 22.
So I want to thank the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and their fearless leader, Alvin Bragg. He is about to get a taste of what I went through, and I promise you, it's not fun. Picturing Donald Trump being led through the booking process, getting fingerprinted, having his mugshot taken, fills me with delight and sadness all at the same time. Sadness, I say, because what an embarrassment it is to the office of the presidency to have a former president of the United States handcuffed and mugshotted before the entire world.
That is the only man who was able to say that Donald Trump explicitly agreed to this so-called scheme, this scheme which was totally legal, by the way. But that's the only man, Mike, and the jury seemed to say, yeah, you know what? We like him. We believe him.
Well, does that surprise you, Megyn, when you have a jury pool that voted 87% for Joe Biden and then this corrupt judge and partisan prosecutor Alvin Bragg and Biden operative Matthew Colangelo further rigged the jury selection process where they bounced the three people in Manhattan who followed Trump on Truth, but they didn't bounce people who followed Biden on social media. Remember with Michael Cohen, he is a disbarred attorney. He's a serial perjurer. He's a convicted felon. He admitted during this trial he embezzled $60,000 from President Trump, and this goofball was raising money on TikTok during the trial, trashing Trump. So I don't think that Rachel Maddow, giving him kisses, the first guy she's kissed in her entire life, should be doing this after this guy's raising money on TikTok, trashing Trump.
I really, here's my question for you, Dave. When is Michael Cohen getting arrested again? He admitted to grand larceny on the stand. And by the way, I didn't realize this, but so he stole that 60 grand, right? That 30,000, whatever he was reimbursed around this Redfinch payment. But he stole 420,000 divided by 2, 210,000. We're all lawyers, so I know you guys are doing the math with me. He stole 210,000 because Trump reimbursed him double these payments that he thought Michael Cohen had made, and so that he could pay taxes on them and be made whole. But what I heard in the closings was he did not file his tax returns. He did not have taxes taken out of the 420. I believe, based on what I heard, he's got 420,000 sitting in a pot right now. So anyway, my point is, when is he getting arrested, Dave? He admitted to a massive felony under oath on the stand.
Yeah, you're referring to the Redfinch, where he did some work to help Trump in a poll, and then he pocketed the money. And that was a confession to a crime, but there has to be a statute of limitations here, and I think that's what bars the prosecution of him.
Was it done by unlawful means that include violating the Federal Election Act or tax law? Because I know a way around that time bar problem.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, man, because my friends Phil and Mike have been bringing up that jury instruction. Just to make it clear, they did have to find, beyond a reasonable doubt, unanimously, that the defendant violated falsification of business records, and it led to a second crime. And they made clear, the state did, that it was that New York conspiracy to influence an election crime. That had to be unanimous. The part that was not unanimous were the two words, we discussed this last time, unlawful means. What were the unlawful means? And the judge allowed the jury to have different unlawful means. And how about this? I agree with you. I think that is grist for an appeal, because when you allow the jury to say, all right, we're going to lean on federal campaign finance laws. I don't know if you can do that in a state prosecution, or lean on tax laws. Is it a tax violation when the state is made whole? Although what you're telling me now is that if Michael Cohen never paid the taxes, maybe there is a tax violation, but it wouldn't be Trump's tax violation because he did pay him for the taxes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. Go ahead, Phil.
Look, the grand jury never charged Donald Trump with anything related to those 3 statutes that the judge finally determined were the ones that they could choose from. They have to find probable cause to believe that he committed a crime, and that means each and every element of the crime. It's not how the prosecutor or how the judge interprets the indictment. Oh, I'm sure the grand jury must have meant this crime, that crime, or the other crime. No, that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have a grand jury indictment. They're supposed to say specifically what you as the defendant did wrong, so that they can specifically put you on notice what you specifically need to defend at trial. It's called due process. It's called the Fifth Amendment. It's called the Sixth Amendment, right to fair trial. And it's wrong for a judge to allow a case to go to a jury under these circumstances. And it's so far outside the norm that those of us in the legal field, most of us, we're just sort of scratching our heads wondering, are we just living in the twilight zone here when you have a judge that's going to allow something like this to go forward? It's just reprehensible. You can't just have a grand jury do an indictment and leave it so vague that the judge and the prosecutor just sort of get to fill in the blanks later when it comes to time to charge the jury. That's not how it works.
You literally can't. I mean, Dave, you've been on this show before. We've had Andy McCarthy on here. He found this New York State constitutional provision that prohibits incorporating by reference the rest of the penal code. You're not allowed to do that. And why? Because it doesn't give the defendant due process. It doesn't give him notice of what he could be charged with when he's deciding how to behave as a citizen of New York State. He doesn't know that you could actually wind up a felon if you violate federal election law or try to. That's what they were saying here. He attempted to violate federal election law. And therefore, if you do the books wrong, you could be elevating a misdemeanor to a felony because that could be brought in by a state prosecutor against you, even though the feds have exclusive jurisdiction on federal election claims. What appellate court is going to say, yeah, you're good. That's fair to the defendant?
No, I think there's a real chance this could be overturned on appeal for the reasons you say. But to make it clear, they did make it obvious in the indictment that this was about falsification of business records. They mentioned other potential crimes, but I will grant Phil's point that I think they should have, for the sake of transparency, specifically mentioned what the second crime was. What we found out later was that it was that state law, that obscure state law that said you cannot conspire using unlawful means to influence an election. And that was the second statute. And under New York law, it's my understanding, you don't have to set that out in the indictment. You can just reveal it later on, which they did. But the part that I think is able to be appealed, that I think they have a good appeal on, is the two words unlawful means. What were the unlawful means? And the judge did give three options for the jury. And I'm not sure that's going to fly with the high court in New York.
No, because Mike, how could the jury in any world understand federal election law when almost no one understands it? Antonin Scalia is on record as saying, I have no idea. It's too confusing. And the feds, the Federal Election Commission, has exclusive jurisdiction to enforce those claims for this very reason. And yet they didn't hear from an expert. They heard Michael Cohen backdoor the fact that he settled that he was found guilty, he pleaded guilty to such a claim. David Pecker, non-prosecution agreement on such a claim. And no one explained federal election law to them except for the judge in a one-liner, which was wrong, which misstated the law on campaign finance.
Yeah, and the Federal Election Commission, along with the Manhattan U.S. Attorney and the prior Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, and even Bragg himself, declined to bring these charges before Colangelo went to Bragg's office from the Biden Justice Department. And I would say this, I think Dave, my good friend Dave, makes our point for us that even a Democrat elected district attorney is saying that this case has a very strong chance of getting reversed on appeal because of that due process problem where they didn't allege the second crime. Well, I would say if a Democrat elected district attorney thinks that, why the hell would anyone bring this novel charge against a former president who happens to be the leading presidential candidate unless it is a rock solid case? If President Trump had a dead person bleeding in his trunk, I can understand why you would bring criminal charges in that case. You don't bring criminal charges on novel, untested legal theories like they've done here with Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo and this corrupt judge, Juan Merchan, whose daughter's making a lot of money off of this case.
That's the thing, Megyn? I just can't get by. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Sure. Just to set the record straight with my friend Mike, I don't necessarily think it's a strong chance on appeal. I think it's a decent chance on appeal. I would change the adjective there. But also, I still don't have an issue with the fact that they did not specify the second crime in the indictment. I don't think they need to. My issue is that by unlawful means, they allowed the jury to adopt campaign finance laws at the federal level, a tax violation, which may not even exist. I think that's the best chance on appeal. I wouldn't say it's strong, but I think it's pretty decent.
I just do not believe this is true. I think the instruction on federal election law was very clearly wrong. And once again, they got into the subjective thought that was in the defendant's head. There was evidence allowed on that over and over. You know, what was the reason for these payments? Was it, more to help him win the election, or was it more to keep this a secret from Stormy? And that was ultimately reflected in its own way in the jury instructions. And I go back to Brad Smith. Find me a smarter election law lawyer than Brad Smith, and I will listen. I await that person and him saying Brad's got the election law totally wrong. Former chairman of the FEC, who's been out there appointed by Bill Clinton, saying the following. And we've played his soundbite, but I'll give you more Brad Smith because he's a very interesting guy. No one's freaking rebutting him. I mean, great, show me how wrong he is. I Google it all the time, as this audience knows. Here's what he said in a piece that was posted in the I think it was posted in the Washington Examiner. That's where I read it. And it's entitled, Brad Smith, What I Would Have Told the Trump Jury. He was banned from speaking ultimately the judge said, okay, you can put him on, but he can only define a couple of terms. And Team Trump said, what's the point of that? Okay, so no. But he wanted to tell the jury, and he says as follows: we would have liked to flag, okay, whatever, he's picking up another thought. We would have talked about what this phrase means for the purpose of influencing an election, and explain to the jury this is not a subjective test like what was my intention. It is an objective test. So hiring campaign staff is for the purpose of influencing an election, renting space for your campaign office, buying ads, maybe doing polling, printing up bumper stickers, travel to campaign rallies, renting venues for campaign rallies. All of these things exist only because you are running for office. But under the personal use rules of campaign finance laws, a lot of things candidates do running for office are not considered campaign expenditures, which is what the government was arguing these hush money payments to Stormy and Karen McDougal were, campaign expenditures that needed to comply with the limitations under law. He says, so a lot of these things that candidates do running for office are not considered campaign expenditures. Things like paying for a weight loss program or a gym membership, nicer clothes, teeth whitening, all that sort of thing. It may be true that you do those things in part to help yourself get elected. You might not do them otherwise, but they are not obligations that exist simply because you are running for office. Lots of people do these things. This notion of personal use, and I would have talked about this, and the idea that what a campaign expense is an objective test, not a subjective one. Phil, it's just to me it's a tragedy that the jury didn't know any of this. And this is why I don't really hold this jury responsible for this. I hold Judge Merchan and Alvin Bragg responsible for this.
Yeah,
Megyn, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No, I look, Merchan and Bragg are the two people that are responsible for this. And to our point of our discussion earlier, when I said we shouldn't necessarily retaliate by having now Republicans go after Democrat politicians and indict them for political reasons, but what we can do is we can police the people who are responsible for things like this. We can find out how it is that Justice Merchan has all of the cases that are related to Trump. Some kind of funny business is going on there. That can be investigated. That can be rooted out. And if people need to be punished, then things can happen to punish them. You've got ethics violations by prosecutors. You've got ethics violations by judges. Those things can be aggressively gone after. And absolutely, if the people that are responsible for creating these situations in the first place, they are the ones who need to pay the price. And if they violated some kind of federal law in doing it, then so be it. They can have a federal indictment to stand for what they've done. But I don't think we can go around and retaliate necessarily for political purposes. But when it comes to how you have a trial that is run the way Merchan ran this trial, it absolutely rose to the point early on that it was so unfair that the entirety of the way he ran his court, I think, was a violation of procedural due process. And I certainly hope that the courts of appeal that look at this will see it for what it is. Unfortunately, that may take several years.
Can I just say,
Megyn?
I think neither Mike nor I are suggesting that we just invent crimes. But I think, Stalin-like, show me the person and I'll show you the crime. I bet all four of us have committed some sort of a violation. I was joking the other day that this has been reduced to for Trump is he pulled the tag off the mattress. I mean, I've done it. I'm not going to lie. I pulled that tag right off. It's annoying. And so you could come after me. Yeah, if you really wanted to. I'm saying if this is where we are, where we're just going to pick the most threatening person from the other side's party and try to find some crime to wrap around them, then this is the gutter we're going to have to live in temporarily in order to save the country. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Megyn, the expert that you cited, as you remember, I was on with him, and to counter him, I said, well, what about the John Edwards prosecution? And his response was, well, yes, that is the exception, and I think the judge got it wrong in allowing that to go forward. So even if he was allowed to testify, it's not foolproof. There's at least one court that found the opposite and allowed the John Edwards prosecution to go forward. So that's why I think that, look, bottom line is, if Donald Trump didn't want this to happen. He should have either adopted a different defense or should never have paid off his lawyer to pay off the adult film star.
That's crazy talk. You were right on the first point about he should have tried the case differently. But it's not true, and it's so unfair to say. So, Dave, under this theory, I had a big debate with Dan Abrams about this last night on News Nation. So under this theory, if you're running for president and some loser comes out of the woodwork and says, I'm going to tell everybody I had an affair. All right, let's say it's not true. Let's say it's just some money grab. I'm going to tell everyone we had an affair. You cheated on your family, your wife, whatever. And you cannot pay her off in advance of an election because you're now required to air all of your dirty laundry in front of the public or you've committed a crime.
Well, you can't have someone else pay her off. That would be an unlawful contribution to your campaign. You could perhaps do it yourself, but you can't have someone else do it. And that's the problem here.
Why not?
It was a campaign violation.
Why not? No, it's not, because hush money payments objectively, under the objective standard, not the subjective one that is wrongly used here, are paid all the time. Raise your hand if you've ever signed an NDA. We've all signed NDAs. Everybody signed one. Everybody's had one signed. Everybody's gotten sued. If you have 2 minutes in the professional sphere, as a lawyer, as a successful business executive, you're either going to get sued or you're going to sue somebody. And NDAs happen in hush money, whatever you want to call it. It's a contract where it's like, shut the hell up about your weird allegations and I'll give you some nuisance value to go away.
Well, the campaign finance limit at the time was $2,800. That's the problem. When Michael Cohen gave Stormy Daniels $130,000, that was a
We're talking around each other. We're talking around each other.
Yeah, but
a campaign donation, whether it's a campaign contribution, is determined by Brad Smith, by his objective test. And your only answer to that is John Edwards, which means one federal district court, we talked about this, found the opposite, and in a case in which John Edwards was not convicted and no one else. And yet you discard the actual experts' testimony and testimonial everywhere, Dave, that this is the law and that judge got it wrong.
Well, the appellate court determined whether it's a law. That's Mr. Smith's opinion, because when I confronted him with John Edwards, he was like, well, they got it wrong. So the law is not that clear. And when the law says if it's meant to influence an election, then it's a violation.
It's clear. It's clear. All right. I have a friend, Dave, from law school. Her name is Donna. She listens to this show every day. And at the end of the show every day, she's a Democrat. She sends me a note and she says, almost every time you're on, Dave is a good sport. And I feel the same. You are a good sport. Thank you for coming on and giving us the alternate view and taking all the arguments when you're kind of one man against three today. Yes, she's a big fan. As I know are Mike and Phil. You guys, we appreciate it today and every day.
So I'm with Dave on everything, just about everything to deal with Israel, but just not on this stuff.
He may be part of my. And I need to move to Florida and get a prosecutor job part-time. So I've got to be nice.
Look at this. See, we're all coming together in the end. Lots of love, guys. Thanks for coming on. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for joining me today and all week. What a week. My God. Please tell me how you feel.